Thank you everyone for joining this webinar presentation entitled Annual Fund, Building a Program that Fits Your Organization. This webinar is part of the Indiana Historical Society's Heritage Support Grants Program made possible by Lilly Endowment. Right now, I see that we have about 14 people. We had 39 registered, so I know that some folks might be doubling up or maybe someone's going to need an extra minute. So at this time, I'm going to give it just one more minute for folks to come in, and then we will get started. So just as just a quick bit of um, housekeeping, um, if you have any questions, please fill them. Please submit them. They'll show up, and most likely we will do a Q&A session at the end of the whole webinar. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm just going to, I'll answer questions at the very end there. So before we do get started, I do want to let you know how you can participate in today's session. You should see your attendee dashboard on your computer desktop. It'll be in the upper right corner. And you've joined today's webinar listening through your computer's speaker system by default, but if you'd like to call in using the phone, just locate your audio pane and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. Again, if you have any questions for anyone who might have joined us within the past minute, please put them in the question pane. You can click send and again, we'll do the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. I do want to let you know that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow. It's going to include a link for the recorded webinar, and also it's going to include a participant survey. Thank you, thank you, thank you in advance for completing the survey because we use it for our own program evaluation. So let's see, I think I've given it just a minute or two. Well, let's start things off today. My name's Bryce Gorman, and I am the fundraising educator in local history services at the Indiana Historical Society. My goal is to help organizations build robust fundraising programs so they can be effective at their mission. I'm responsible for the educational curriculum that's an important part of our Heritage Grant, our Heritage Support Grants program. I offer free workshops, webinars, and consultations to organizations in Indiana. If you happen to be outside of the state, as soon as you cross the state line and come into Hoosier territory, I'll be happy to chat with you. So let's get started with a quick poll. I would like to, it's honestly, what I would like to do is just see how many people are in attendance. So this is going to give me an idea of how many people are viewing, and because we've noticed that some organizations will have a couple people sit in on the same screen and all that. So if this is just helpful. So if you could just click how many of you are in attendance, that would be a huge help. So thank you very much. We are just about everyone voted. All right, so I'll just give another couple of seconds for that. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and we shall get started. Thank you very much, everyone. Here's an overview of some of what we're going to cover today. First, we will review the benefits and challenges of an annual fund. Then we're going to examine the planning steps that are necessary before undertaking an annual fund. And finally, we're going to spend some time outlining the different types of annual fund appeals. My goal is to give you some ideas that might work for your organization and find something that will help you with your own planning, and you can make this your own. So what is an annual fund? In its simplest form, an annual fund refers to gift programs which are used for your operating budget or unrestricted giving, where you have complete control over the giving. Something I do want to note, annual fund does not mean you only ask for money once a year. I, I want to stress that you can ask as many times and ways as you feel necessary, but donors will most likely give once a year. And I like the double the donation definition. That is great alliteration. But double the donation had a great definition for an annual fund. It's a catch-all program for general nonprofit fundraising. Um, so annual fund solicitations can be an incredible benefit to your organization. It allows you to bring in uh, unrestricted dollars for your most pressing needs. This is also a fundraising program that is easy for new donors. They can support you with a smaller gift and no long-term commitment. It allows them to test the waters, and new donors want to see how you treat them as donors and ultimately whether whether they're going to support you the next time. That might sound nerve-wracking, but this becomes a great opportunity to cultivate major donors. If they see your organization properly stewarding their annual fund gift, they become more likely to give larger and larger amounts as your relationships grow. Most major donors do not start from one big gift. They start small and build their way up. From a financial point of view, an annual fund is often more cost effective than events. Consider that much of your time is spent writing, collecting data, and contacting donors, as opposed to all of the planning and hours that go into an event. Now, I'm using events as an example because they are a common way organizations raise unrestricted funding. So this is just the most common way, and I thought this would be a good comparison. If you find yourself with limited time, an annual fund solicitation might be more efficient than other fundraising forms. On the other side, annual fund programs also come with challenges. You will have to make your case to a donor every year without sounding repetitive. If your donors start hearing the same message again and again, they might lose interest. There are also some giving trends that do not favor annual fund programs. Average donors, I'm sorry, are giving to fewer charities. Most of us, we're limiting the charities that we're giving to. This makes unrestricted dollars more and more competitive every year. And right now that trend is it's growing. I do not know if it's going to taper off. As a fundraising tool, the annual fund is mostly smaller gifts than, say, sponsorships, major gifts, or certainly planned gifts. Since I mentioned the return on investment in the benefits side, I think it's only fair to note that things like rising costs in postage and decreases in phone responses make the annual fund less lucrative than it was before. Um, Now, online giving, uh, that may be a way to avoid a lot of those expenses like postage, but that too does have a lower response rate. So I just want you to see some of the benefits and the challenges before you implement any programs yourself. Now, you can mitigate these challenges by planning out your annual fund program. So good news, this is just how you would plan out your entire fundraising program. So all of the planning that you do, either with your fundraising planning or your annual fund program, can cross over and work with the other. Um, Before you send any letters, emails, or make any calls, you're going to have a donor database. This is traditionally known as a constituent record management system. Your solicitations will convey your story, define your needs, planning your messaging is going to help you connect with more donors. It's important to consider when you want to solicit your donors. So having a fundraising calendar is going to be incredibly important. Do you want to send a year-end appeal, or is that going to be lost in the holiday clutter? And finally, what type of solicitation will you be sending? We're going to look at all of this in more detail. Starting with constituent record management, a CRM system is a dedicated database of all of your organization's relationships, members, donors, volunteers, businesses, everything. Having this dedicated database, it allows you to coordinate all of the information that you might need for your fundraising efforts. It's an important place to collect donor names, spouse names, how to get in contact with them, whether it's email, phone call, their address. You want to keep it all together. You want to look at things like how long have these individuals been members? What have they given in the past? Either have they given to programs? Have they given to just general support? How much? Have they gone to events in the past? Constituent record management system, it allows you to have all of this information in one place where it will not get lost when, say, oh, a volunteer decides to retire, or you upgrade to a new computer. If you need, constituent record management system can be, there are plenty of very expensive options out there. But there's also plenty of good, efficient ones that might take a little tweaking for your organization. But honestly, you can do the same thing with an Excel document. The important thing is to have a dedicated space and to make sure that you're not duplicating the work and leaving a portion of it in one computer and a portion in another. So that's the important takeaway. If you need further guidance on CRMs, please let me know either in the questions or offline, and I'll send you a little more information on that. So your messaging starts with your story. You talk about who you are, what's your mission, what are your goals, what's your history, and not just your community's history, but your history within that community. What exactly do you need? And I'm being very, I'm emphasizing exactly. Why is it important? And at the same time, solvable. You want to explain the logical steps needed to implement this solution. Every donor wants to know why their money is needed by you. They want to know what you're going to do with this money. Your messaging needs to show how annual fund priorities fit into your overall goals. Even if your annual fund exists just to pay the bills, that still fits into your priorities of maintaining a quality collection. Impact drives many donors' decision making, and it should be part of your messaging. They want to know what their donation will do for you in the community. Your impact should go beyond your property lines. They want to know that supporting you is supporting the community as a whole. And it's helpful to frame your case in an emotional response. Bear in mind, this goes beyond a binary happy, sad response. For instance, hope, gratitude, pride, inspiration. These are all positive emotions that you can use. And find your story, find the way that it organically fits. As a fundraising calendar lets you plan out all of your fundraising activities 6, 12, 18 months in advance. This lets you see where you need to be in the process. So use your calendar to cross-reference any of your activities with community events, holidays. I know that a lot of us, we have a population that might go south for the winter. So use your calendar to set firm drop dates. When exactly, I'm going to emphasize this again, when exactly do you need a donor to have the year-end letter in their hands? This calendar lets you work backwards from there. Be sure to plan plenty of time, not just for the writing and the mailing, but the editing and the review. If you spend a lot of time editing and reviewing these documents, any letters, emails, phone scripts, this is going to let you avoid any careless errors. Just a couple interesting little tidbits. As a fundraiser, I find these statistics fascinating. 17% of all giving happens in December. This is when everyone's writing their checks, and it's when every charity is asking for money. What I'd like to stress here is you need to determine the most strategic time to solicit your donors. It might be more beneficial to solicit donors in mid-November to beat the rush. Uh, but if you have donors that are constantly giving right around the holidays, stick with it. You know, December 31st is the very busiest giving day. Right now, it beats Giving Tuesday hands down. This might change with some of the changes to the tax laws, but for now, a lot of folks make their gift at the last minute. It would be very risky to do all of your fundraising on the 31st. I'm not advocating it. Uh, but what I'm advocating is, if you have a online giving option, maybe a last minute email or a Facebook post or a tweet, just reminding folks to make their gift to you before the end of the year. An annual fund program is much more than a year-end letter. Your organization is going to have a lot of options to raise unrestricted funding that can work not only for you, but also your donors. There are four main ways to ask for annual fund donations: via the phone, direct mail, online, and in person. And we're going to go into each of these in just a couple minutes. Now, I don't want you to think this chart means you have to do every single kind of solicitation here. Different solicitations are going to work for different organizations and different audiences. My goal with this chart is to help you determine which ways are going to be most effective for you. Each type of annual fund appeal is going to have its benefits and challenges as well as a target audience. Direct mail, this is going to include spring appeals, year-end appeals, any special letters that you send out maybe for uh, maybe a board member wants to match gifts for this month. So all of that via direct mail. Most of this appeals to new donors. They can have something in hand. This makes your case rather than say a call that from their point of view is from a relative stranger. Established donors who may have been giving for well over a decade, they may also have come to expect a letter from you. So the direct mail program, this is a classic solicitation. We've all received, oh geez, I think I've received maybe a dozen just this week, but we're all used to it. And it's a great way to reach a large audience. The downside is it's time consuming. It takes a while to prepare all of the information. You can pay for you can pay for a mail house to do the mailing for you, but that's going to chip away from your profits. If your letter is sent in December, you're competing with everyone else's letter. Um, so, like I just said, I got about a dozen this week, and I can't really point out which ones I received. I just know that there was a stack of them. So if you feel like this is a good time to send your letters, by all means do it. Um, Phone solicitations, they're a lot more straightforward. This is better for donors who are renewing their gifts. People who have renewed their gifts, they know you already. They've come to expect a solicitation. And the great thing about using the phone is it allows for a real conversation. You just can't get that through the mail or email. The phone is a more personal touch, but you don't have to leave the office. On the other side, the phone can be challenging to reach donors at the right time. Phone solicitations are becoming less popular because we all have smartphones now. We see the number pop up, we don't recognize it. I'll say this, anytime my wife gets a call on her personal phone and she doesn't automatically know the caller, she sends it to voicemail. So that is one of the challenges that come with phone solicitations. Online giving, though, is becoming more popular every year, especially younger donors, and it's a great way to reach out to renewed donors, much like the phone. It's very cost efficient. It's a way to communicate with everyone without paying for postage, and it also has this unique option of including pictures, videos, links, social media clicks that you just can't get in any other solicitation. The challenge, however, is online giving, it still feels impersonal. Many people don't think it's that personal. I think all of us get dozens to hundreds of emails every day, and this kind of appeal does not offer the same personal connection as a letter or phone call. And as such, the response rate is very low. Finally, in-person meetings are hands down the best way to reach your biggest donors. This is a very specific, very personal solicitation, and for a century, more than a century, it has been a tried and true method. On the other side, you might be spending over an hour, 2 hours with just one person. It is a huge commitment of your time, and so it is best used for your biggest donors. So I hope that gives you uh, some information that can be helpful. I did receive one question. I'm just going to mention this. I have one question about I'd love to receive more information on CRMs. And yes, absolutely. I can send you some of the information I have on constituent record management. Anyone else who would like to receive any information, just at the very end of the webinar, I'm going to have my email, or I'll just take down your name when at the end, and I will send you more information. So yes, I'm happy to do that. Now that we've talked about different types of appeals, you might be considering some of these options for your own organization. As you begin the planning process, it is, excuse me, as you begin the planning process, it's helpful to be prepared to use multiple solicitation approaches for donors. For instance, you might start with a letter in late November and follow up in, say, early December with a phone call if they haven't responded, or an email. When you're deciding which type of appeal to send, consider what the donor's expectations are. An established donor who has received letters every year might not expect or appreciate an email, whereas a younger donor might appreciate an email even if they've been giving a couple of years, they might appreciate an email with more information, more links to different events and activities. So it's helpful to know your donors. When it comes to in-person solicitations, I think I mentioned this the previous slide, it's helpful to prioritize the donors who are going to respond most positively to this kind of solicitation. Most of these folks are probably people that you already know, and they will be some of your larger donors. I think it's helpful before you start setting up meetings, maybe consider who your top 10 donors are. Look at the people who are your biggest donors and determine out of all of them, if you could only see 10 of them, who would they be? One way to approach your annual fund program is to segment your donors by their giving interests. If you want to solicit people who attended one of your genealogy lectures, you might highlight how their gift can expand your own genealogical materials. Your appeals can also be used to remind donors of other ways they can support your organization. I always like to include information about becoming a volunteer, or putting your organization in their estate plans. It's honestly, it's just a reminder. So let's say you have a letter and you have one of the reply cards, and at the end it says, please send me more information about putting X organization in my estate plans. Well, maybe I had never considered it up to this point, and you decide, okay, I'd like to see more information. Well, there you go. You've already established a new relationship. So let's talk about some of the things that you want to use for any of your appeals. Your appeals should be personalized to your donor. Whether that's Dear John or Dear Mr. Smith, it's entirely up to you. But John Smith should feel like you are talking to them directly. Appeals should be very conversational in tone. Keep in mind, this is not a lecture. This is an open conversation. Solicitation should be direct. This is not the space to talk about every issue in your organization, all of your challenges, all the research you're doing. This is not the place for that. This is the space to talk about giving. This is also a place to be as specific as possible about giving. If you want a donor to renew their gift, include that amount. I'm sorry. If you want a donor to renew their previous gift, let's say they gave $100, note that in the solicitation, say that, Mr. Smith, we appreciate your past support of $100, and if you are able to renew your gift at $100, we will be able to continue offering the genealogical services that we've offered in the past. So remind them what they've supported in the past and at what level. So when you're specific, you anchor a specific amount in their mind rather than letting them decide, what's the least amount of money I can give. As you make your case to donors, they often want to see success stories. What have you achieved since the last time you asked for a donation? This could be something along the lines of new collections, programs you've offered, or changes to your building. Donors need to see that your organization needs their gift as soon as possible. If a donor feels like there's no deadline for their gift, it just increases the chances that they're never going to sign that check. All of your solicitations should include contact information. Donors might have questions. They might be unclear on something, and you want to give them a way to be in touch with you to clarify any of these questions. If you're sending a letter or email, have a way for them to reply automatically. It could be a link to your giving page, a self-addressed envelope, a reply card. You don't want to create unnecessary hurdles when you ask for money. Let's look at the other side. Your annual fund should not include language like "Dear Sir" or "Dear Madam." It's so impersonal. I think we've all received those letters before. Your donors might feel like they're unimportant, when the truth is they're incredibly important to you. Your appeals should not ramble on. Again, you want to be direct and specific. As I mentioned in the last slide, this is just not the space for talking about anything that is not related to giving. If donors feel like every appeal is a make or break situation, it's exhausting. They might start to see you as an organization that is constantly struggling. This ultimately creates a negative opinion of your organization, and donors might end up giving up on you. You want your donors to feel like supporting you is a positive experience. They should not feel guilty when they read your appeal. They should feel excited and hopeful. This makes donors excited to hear from you. In the museum world and the whole nonprofit world, we use a good amount of jargon. Using too much jargon is going to lose donor interest really, really quickly. Again, it's not a research paper, so it's helpful for some people to print out uh, print out the letter or email or whatever you want to send out, and have someone who's not affiliated with your organization read it and tell you what they do and don't understand. That way, you can eliminate some of the jargon that you're not even noticing. Um, Finally, it's important not to rush your annual fund appeals. Your goal is to bring in donations, not meet an arbitrary deadline. You want to make sure that this is the best possible appeal at that moment. So I think it was last month, I received a invitation to a conference, and the individual who sent this email clearly rushed it. They didn't do the proper mail merge thing, and I got an email that said, quotation marks, sir, we look forward to seeing you at this conference. And I kind of rolled my eyes at it, but I responded to him and said, hey, look, I'm not even interested in the conference, but you should fix your mail merge. And the guy was so embarrassed, but he's already kind of made that mistake. So I wanted him to be able to fix it. Just a quick note. I'd like to talk about direct mail, but you have 5 handouts in your in this webinar. You can click them on the right-hand panel. The only reason I mentioned that right now is I have a letter called the Pritchard House letter. That's one that I created just as kind of a um, I didn't want to show off anyone's specific direct mail, so I just created an example. So feel free to use that if you want. There are some notes in there, and if you have any questions, just let me know. But let's talk about direct mail a little bit. Direct mail is tried and true, whether it's your end of the year letter or a spring appeal postcard. Letters should be maximum 1 page, 12 to 14 point simple font, mostly for legibility. You want anyone who's got any vision issues to be able to read it without any trouble. These letters should focus on the donor and how they can make a difference. You're making the case for your organization, but the letter needs to demonstrate how this particular donor is going to have an impact on your organization. If possible, have examples of what their giving will support. This might be something as straightforward as your annual budget, or it might be something like storage materials for a new collection. There are times when it's appropriate to ask donors to increase their gift, and you can use success stories to talk about. You can use those success stories we talked about earlier to address how you made a good use of their previous donations and how a larger donation can do so much more. So I love pictures. I think they can convey some really incredible stories and evoke emotion, but they got to be used sparingly in direct mail. You are so limited on space. One great picture can say everything. For instance, I chose this picture because that little girl is adorable. And having one picture there tells more of a story and emphasizes direct mail more than having a set of pictures. I think that direct mail is a great way to use your people in the process. Volunteers can hand address envelopes, or if they know somebody that's receiving a letter, they can write little notes. This adds a personal touch that no one else can replicate. That direct knowledge of the donor and the handwritten note, no one else will be able to do that. And you're not going to find that in any other non-face-to-face solicitation. Phone solicitations are, as I mentioned earlier, they're better utilized for renewing donations. New donors may be wary about answering the phone if they don't know your number. It's helpful to have a script for phone solicitations so that you can have a specific ask ready. You don't want to risk stumbling over your words when you're trying to solicit a gift. So also have a script ready for voicemails. You'll probably get a lot of voicemails. Keep it very quick, less than a minute. You still want to include your contact information. So it's helpful to know your audience, and it's also helpful to know, oh shoot, I'm getting a response that there's no audio. Is anyone else having this problem? Okay, um, so I'm being told that others can hear me just fine. Okay, I'm hearing that some people can hear me. Whoops. Okay, thank you, Dave. Um, okay, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening with your audio. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of people can say that they can hear me fine. I would check and see if there's a problem with your computer speakers. But if you want to call in on the number, it should be on the phone section. So you can call in on that, and that should that should uh, bring you into the audio. So thank you everyone for responding, and if you have any more problems, we will try and get that addressed. Excuse me. So it's helpful to know your audience and their schedule for any phone interviews. For instance, I myself work 8 to 5, and I have to drop my son off at daycare. So by the time I'm available to talk, it's usually 6 o'clock. At the same time, I'm putting my son to bed around 8 o'clock. So there's a really small window when someone can call me. You compare this to my father, who is he's retired, and he has a lot more time available during the day to talk. If you know your donors, then you'll have a better idea of when they're going to be available. More and more donors are giving online. While not exclusive to the annual fund, most online giving is unrestricted to in an organization. If you don't already have an online giving option, this is the time to start. PayPal is very popular. But there are some good options for nonprofits out there. Some of them will do a lot more work for you, and those will usually charge a percentage of the gift. But if you'd like more information on online giving, I have some information available I can send. A lot of donors, especially younger donors, are using mobile phones to make their gifts. So it's really helpful to have a simplified donation page that is, I'm going to say this again, direct and to the point. Um, you do not want your donors to have to spend a lot of time filling out every field. This is online giving, a giving page. That's not the space to collect donor data. This is just the space to accept gifts. There are some great options for surveys, and you can use that rather than your giving page. If you do have an online giving portal that allows for recurring donations, so month to month, quarterly, those are popular. This is the perfect space to ask for a monthly gift. Uh, Personally, this is what I do because as a donor, it's easy. And I don't have to write any checks. I don't have to click anything. It just comes out of my credit card. So if you have that option, I think it's a great one to use. Something that your giving page should include are links to social media because it offers a very quick way for a donor to interact with your organization. And with any given giving page, um, it is it's very helpful to have a thank you page along with it. It's a very quick way to tell your donors how much you appreciate them. Now, you still need to send a thank you note, but this is an additional layer of stewardship that is almost instantaneous. Okay. I absolutely love this example. It's from an animal shelter. To be honest, I'm a sucker for animals. This Twitter post, I love it also because it's a great example of fundraising. So it shows that for $10, you can get the microchip, heartworm test, rabies vaccinations, or heartworm prevention. It's just 144 characters and a link, but they make a specific ask of $10 that's going to have a direct impact of that adorable puppy. It is just a great example of how to make an impactful online solicitation. So, it just felt like, hey, let's put a puppy in the webinar. So I separate email out from online giving because online giving is a little more passive, whereas email is a direct solicitation. Much like phone solicitations, email is best used for renewing donors. While a letter needs to be one page, 12-point font, emails have to be even shorter, usually less than 400 words. I use bullet points and bolded text to emphasize the important points, and I think it's really helpful to do that. A lot of people are just going to skim. Email's a place to include pictures and videos because it grabs your donor's attention. I just showed you a puppy. That grabs everybody's attention. Just be sure not to get so caught up in the additional media that you bury the ask. Have a direct solicitation early on, or at least a reminder of why you're emailing the person. In-person solicitations are, as I mentioned earlier, the most personal way to solicit someone for any level of gift. This is tried and true, and it is one of the best ways to raise money. Before you sit down with a donor, though, you want to set those expectations with them. They need to know why you're coming. If you ask a donor to grab a cup of coffee and chat about your museum, if you then make the entire conversation about their giving, that's going to sound like a bait and switch, and you just don't want to do that to your donors. I like to use the phrase, I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with our organization and ways that you could become more involved, including your philanthropic support. This way, a donor knows that we're going to be talking about other things, but also giving. When you do solicit a donor, have a specific amount and purpose in mind. For example, would you be able to make a $250 contribution to support our archives and our new digitization process for county history? That is specific, the dollar amount, the purpose, and once you've made that ask, let your donor speak first. They may need to think about it, and if you speak up, you're going to be arguing against yourself. No matter what the outcome of the meeting is, set up next steps right there. Next steps, it could be something along the lines of sending further information about a program, including the donor and event invitations. Just let them see that you want to continue this relationship beyond money. In-person meetings are a great way to use your people. For example, you might have a donor who's interested in some of your educational work. Bringing a volunteer who has, they've been leading some of your school groups, this is going to add so much depth to the meeting that just you and the donor would not be able to have. In-person meetings are a great place for board members to participate in the whole solicitation process. So I know that board giving is a bit of a sore spot for some people, and it's a tough one. And a new board member might be intimidated to make an ask. So ask them to be part of the meeting to talk about why they joined the board. This is going to reinforce the positive qualities of your organization, and it's going to let the board member be part of the experience. So I've got a handout in the webinar handout section on meetings. And so if you need more information, I would suggest going there first. But again, I'm happy to provide any more information that you might need. I would like to talk about giving levels. They are a very popular way to tier giving and recognize donors at all levels. This offers a reason for donors to stretch their gift, going from, say, the $30 level to a $50 level. If you are looking to set up giving levels, look for your organization's natural giving levels. You might see that a lot of donors give around the $25, $50, or $100 level, and so forth. And so create your giving levels around that. As individuals offer more money, it's up to you and your organization to include and offer increasing benefits. So I want to stress these benefits shouldn't necessarily be stuff like tote bags. Rather, it should be experiences. Donors love having private access to your organization. This might be a private tour, early attendance to an event. Honestly, donors love free parking. I love free parking. And if that's an option for you, if you have some dedicated spaces and you can offer one to high tier donors, go for it. Um, Lifetime giving. So I wanted to include a point about lifetime giving. It is a common giving level, and I think it should be avoided. My reason is that it removes any expectations for future giving and relationship building. So you might have a donor who's made a lifetime gift, and in 3 years after, 5 years after, no one's talking to them again. They have no reason to go back to them and ask them to come to an event. So it might work for your organization. If so, wonderful. But I think it's something to avoid if you haven't already used it. So here's an example that I put together. Notice that each of these levels, century, silver, they all build on one another. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for every level. So as these levels go up, you get membership and a subscription to a magazine that I completely came up with. Then the next level, all the same stuff, but the membership grows, and then you get recognized, and it tiers up and up and up. Um, so you, donors are not receiving more stuff. Now they do receive some tickets, but they're receiving access. They're getting more recognition, and that's what your bigger donors want. Stewardship is one of the most important aspects of the fundraising cycle. Donors need to know that you're grateful, and they need to know that you're going to be fiscally responsible with their gift. My personal rule of thumb, thank donors within 48 hours somehow, 48 hours of receiving their gift. If you cannot get a thank you letter out, call them. Do whatever you need to, but they need to know that you appreciate it. A handwritten note, it's a dying art, but donors of all ages love getting handwritten notes. It doesn't matter if you're a kid, uh, if you are, if you're in your 30s, 50s, 90s, everyone loves getting handwritten notes. And it is an easy way to respond to donors, to thank them. And it's the perfect activity for older volunteers. If you have older volunteers who would like a job working from home, this is the perfect thing for them to do. Most organizations are going to thank donors for the size of their gift, and you should, but donors also love being recognized for other aspects of their philanthropy. Remarking on a donor's years of giving, or if they increase their giving, shows that you're paying attention to them. Along with volunteers, board members can be used to make thank you calls. It involves the board in the full philanthropic cycle. So let's say that board member, the young board member, came on the solicitation visit, and he talked about why he was on the board, and you made the ask, and then the gift comes in because you're an excellent fundraiser, and it's time to thank that person. Having that same board member send the thank you note is going to just involve them in the whole cycle, and it's going to remind your donor that, hey, they really care about me. So it adds a level of prestige. So I hope this webinar has offered some options for you to explore regarding annual fund. Once you've implemented your new solicitations, it is valuable to measure the success. There are some great ways to measure success in an annual fund. Dollars and donors is a good first step. As this is fundraising, our primary goal needs to be raising money. Along with that, however, is donor retention. The standard metric for the US is about 30 to 40% of donors are retained year after year. So you can measure this by looking at your donors from the previous year and see how many renewed their gift. It doesn't mean kept the same level, increase, decrease, anything. It's just whether they gave anything the year before and this year. Uh, Honestly, it's so much more profitable and time efficient to retain donors than find new ones. There are some great equations for showing that retaining donors will bring in more money, but this isn't the space for that. When looking at in a specific appeal, how many did you send out versus how many responded? This is going to be your response rate. Don't be discouraged if that response rate is low. That is actually typical of all of our organizations. Everyone, doesn't matter how big or small they are, response rates can be low. What I'd like to suggest, though, is to find your most and least successful strategies, solicitations, and use those. So I'd like to recap. Your annual fund appeals, it's a great way to raise funds for an organization, but it's going to take proper planning to do that. If you quicken the process, if you don't double check, you can stumble. I want to emphasize that there are multiple ways to solicit for annual fund. Each one's going to have benefits, risks, and challenges. And no matter what process you implement, no matter what planning, appeal, evaluate it. So you can determine what's the best way and the best approach for your organization. This is my contact information. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions about the presentation or if you'd like to talk through anything a little more. At this time, I'm going to take any questions you might have before I close the webinar. Okay, so I've got a question about having solicitations that are multiple pages. So I really think it depends on the organization. I think 2 pages, if it's front to back, if you're adding a lot of information and uh, maybe graphics, pictures, things like that, you can do 2 pages, but what I would like to stress is to have places early on that talk about we want to talk about giving, and we hope we can rely on your support. So donors are going to skim everything, and if they really care, they're going to read it. That's what we all do for pretty much everything we read. I can't help psychology. So just having bold points that say, we hope we can rely on your support this year or something along that, I think you could have 2 pages or more as long as you're constantly emphasizing that you need their support. So I think that could be perfectly fine. And I had a question about using your newsletter to using a newsletter to include the solicitations. So, sorry, I just want to make sure I have the right thought process here. So I think that for a newsletter, I think it could be very helpful to reinforce things and to remind people ways they can give. Things like reminding people that you always need support for these things, or to use a newsletter to say, we received donations from John and Jane Smith. We are so grateful to them. So you can cultivate and steward donors, and you can include a constant reminder of giving in newsletters. But while I think it's a good way to save money, I think that it's also important to remind people specifically of giving. So certainly keep it in the newsletter, but maybe implement some other options like including it on your Facebook page or sending emails out. Those could also be a way to save on the cost of running an annual fund. So yes, certainly keep it in the newsletter, but maybe think of some other ways that you can incorporate it as well. And let's see, any suggestions for a provider of recurring donation services? Yes, absolutely. There are plenty of online options, and I can include that. I can send you a few. So I don't think PayPal has one right now, and the Facebook Giving, they do not have one, but they're both, they're not going to take anything off the top, which for a lot of organizations is a pretty big start. There are some good ones on, let's see, I think capterra.com has a really good uh, rundown of different online giving options and different sites that can accept donations and what they're going to take off the top. So any organization that's going to do recurring giving, they're either going to take a fee per transaction or a percentage of the transaction. They'll list it all out. So I think capterra.com and then search for nonprofit online giving. I think that would be a good start, but absolutely, I can send you some links otherwise. Let's see what else we have. Oh, I've got a follow-up for the newsletter. Can the letter be mailed with the newsletter as a separate document in the same mailing? It absolutely can. And I think that that could be a good way to remind all of your current members to renew their donation and to call out certain programs that you're doing right now. So that might be a good way to do, say, a spring appeal where you talk about what you'd like to do for the coming year, what events you have coming up for the coming year, what different programs are going to start. So yeah, absolutely, put it in your newsletter. See if I've missed any. Oh, yes, I got a question about the PowerPoint. Yes, I can absolutely send you the slides. You're going to receive a recording of the webinar, and uh, uh, and it'll have all the slides. But if you particularly want just the slides, happy to send that to you. So yes, yes, you will. And also, we're going to put this recording on the website. So if y'all want to listen to it several times and hear me talk for hours on end, you have that option. Okay, I think that is all. If I missed your question, I apologize, but you can shoot me an email. I'm looking just to make sure. Okay, I think I've got all of them, but thank you so much for joining me. I have appreciated all of your time, and again, when I send the survey, please let me know what you do, what you like, and what I could do a little better. So thank you again, and I hope this has been helpful.